Hi there. This is Jake here with SF Indie Fest and the Livable Planet Festival. Want to welcome you to our Shorts with Features Part 2 Q&A block. Hopefully you've watched the films, so this will be good and illuminating. So with us today, we have two of our filmmaking teams. First, if they can have them introduce, I'll have them introduce themselves, and then we can start our conversation. So, Arjan, if you would like to start.
Hello, yes, well, I'm Arjan Brentjes. I made the short animation Sad Beauty that you may have seen. A short animation about a pandemic. I did not make this about COVID pandemic because I made it mostly in 2019. And it's not really about pandemic as a subject. It's more about the end of humanity or something like that. So yeah, I'm happy to be back in San Francisco festival. Thanks for selecting the film.
Thank
you. And you want me to introduce myself?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. My name is Marlena Scrobe, and I'm the director of They Keep Quiet So We Make Noise. This is my first film. It's a documentary short about activists in Malaysia fighting against plastic pollution from being sent from overseas to their town. And I think it's also very representative of just what's going around with plastic waste being shipped to other countries. So hopefully it represents the issue on a global scale as well. And thank you for having me as well.
Oh, no problem. It's our pleasure. So we'll start with you. So how did you, so this is your first documentary short. How did this all come about? You know, what was the, how soon did you, when you heard about this, you said, I have to meet with these folks and really have to document this?
Yeah, so I also made my film in 2019, and I was a master's student at the time. I attended University of Washington School of Marine and Environmental Affairs, studying marine affairs, and a part of my work was researching waste and this global waste trade movement. And I've always been really fascinated by plastic. I think in terms of plastic theory and waste theory, you know, we're so used to getting rid of something when we're done with it. And we're often so removed from that we don't really understand the impacts of, you know, our sort of consumptive lifestyles. But this story came about because yeah, in researching this, I discovered that there was so basically, it's a long story, but the short version is that in 2018, China implemented the National Sword Policy, which essentially banned all the importation of plastic seeds that was being sent from other developed countries. And so then it was rerouted to Southeast Asia mostly, and Malaysia was sort of this new dumping ground. And so I came across a lot of news stories about what was going on and found out about Pua and CK's work and reached out to them and just really wanted to tell their story. I think there's so much great work about what's going on, but it's often talked about in such a way where it's like really hard to figure out how it's really impacting just someone's life, you know, when you think about such a massive problem. So, yeah.
Certainly. And yeah, I mean, it's so vast. And Arjan, you had mentioned, you know, this, you film, you know, we have a documentary short and we have an animated narrative. So it's really, I'm really glad that both of y'all are here. We can kind of, both films can speak to each other in different ways. And Arjan, you mentioned, obviously you worked on this, you know, pre-COVID, but you know, the ideas of climate and kind of where we're going, you know, you can look at it from you can be nihilistic, or you can have these sorts of stories of, you know, this is where we could go, and these are the positive things or sort of things we can think about with that. So I just wanted to ask, like, what was the main genesis, and if there were any initial sort of visual ideas or any sort of like initial ideas in your short that got you started in creating this, and how long did it take too?
Okay, that's quite a package of questions.
Sorry.
So I will just go to the beginning of. I finished the last film before this one, and then I thought about what I'm going to do next. And that was around the time that you had your new president in 2017, and a lot of these types of rulers were emerging across the world. Yeah. And it was pushing heavily on my optimism that I had. I was born in the 70s. and it felt like, in a way, with its ups and downs, the world was just progressing towards more democracy, more freedom, a better world. We would fix the problems, and then things were happening around the world that made me question that, and made me think, well, what if not? You know, what are we? What's the point of everything if we are not going to fix this and survive this? And then strangely, I felt some consolation in the fact that we as humans are just, we've, if you look at the age of life on the planet, we were born yesterday, and we will be dead tomorrow. Like we are a short infection of, we are a short disease for life on this planet. It can be some kind of tough disease that will seriously hurt the planet, but in a way it is arrogance to think that we as a species could end life on this planet, because the things like bacteria are much more resilient as a species than we are. And then I discovered that we even have more bacterial cells in our body than human cells. So then it became an interesting thought that we are just some kind of vessels for them to get around, I guess. I don't know if I came to the end of your list of questions already.
Oh no, I'm sorry, that was a little verbose.
Yeah, I started thinking about it in 2017, and then in 2018 I started writing down some ideas, and I actually made a first animatic, a first moving storyboard of the idea of the film, and then I thought it was really stupid, and then I had to change a lot of it. And that's what I used most of 2019 for. And then I started production in the autumn of 2019. And then it was February 2020, and then the whole world was affected by COVID. And because a pandemic is central in the film, I had to change some things, because the original ending was too heartless for for people that were, people were dying all over the place, and it was like I ended it with sort of tongue-in-cheek, glorious end of humanity, and that was a little too insensitive. So I changed it into a more solemn, poetic ending, which was actually better. So I think the film is better for it in the end. So thanks to COVID, the film has gotten better. And so yeah, COVID. No, nothing like that.
No, sure. No, I love, just the whole idea for working at a museum of natural history and then basically trading places over time. It's like I think it is a really poetic and strong, like, visual and thematic idea. So you were sitting with this project, for a couple years. So I want to kick it to Marlena. So when you got to Kuala Lumpur and we're meeting with this EPA, how long did it take really to get to know these folks? Because I know with documentary, it can be difficult when you're with your subjects, of just getting that trust, understanding each other, and kind of figuring out that relationship. So basically, how long did you kind of connect before you turned on the camera? Was it really immediate? Did it take a little bit? Like, what was that process of meeting them like?
Yeah, the process was very quick, and I feel like this is the opposite of what you're supposed to do and should do. And my background is in anthropology as well, so you always imagine, oh, we'll have so much time with the camera down to get to know each other, but realistically, we were traveling to Malaysia working on another film and only had about 5 days in Kuala Lumpur and hadn't heard back from them until we were there, and finally did. And I was like, well, we're actually here. Like, would you like to meet up And so they said yes, and basically we were just thrown into the gauntlet a little bit. There are a few other activists that aren't featured in the movie just because they didn't, it's also very dangerous for them. They're getting a lot of threats over there, which is why we don't show their faces as much, and it's kind of a little bit more secretive. But we were with them every single day, just driving around looking for these facilities and able to talk. So camera's not really on them. But then with Pua and CK, we got dinner and talked for a long time and then did that initial interview. And I think just immediately bonded because they really, really wanted to get their story out. They've been talking to other international newspapers so much. I mean, I think they had a meeting with PBS or something the next day. And I was so grateful that they took the time to talk with us. But I think when it came down to it, they really just wanted, on the international scale, people to figure out or understand what was going on. And so I think they were talking to us, but really they were just talking to everybody through our interviews. But we like to go back and spend more time with them. And we still talk every week, and they were working with us throughout the editing process. We sent them every single cut and said, does this make sense? Is this accurate to the problem now, since it's always, evolving? And hopefully we'll be able to return once COVID subsides a little bit and make a longer film.
Yeah. I was going to say too, there is the guerrilla style to it. So I'm glad to hear that you kind of just hit the ground running with them, because you really feel it in the short. I just want to ask too, like, how has COVID affected their efforts, both in, documenting this and letting other people know, and has there been any change to the dumping process and to like offshore or offsite dumping into that space because of maybe like product lines changing, and what changes have happened due to COVID? Sorry, a little verbose this morning.
That's a good question. And we did, I asked how's COVID going, not just with their work, but just, with their lives in general. And they said it was okay there. In terms of the amount of plastic we're using, I mean, clearly, as you both probably know, like, we're using so much more plastic and producing so much more waste.
Yes.
And that's going to be a huge challenge. But the other thing that happened was, so there was the Basel Convention, which basically is in charge of the shipments of hazardous waste. There was a big amendment, and then that started January 1st of this year. But of course, the United States has not ratified it, right? And that's like one of the biggest problems. We're the biggest producer of plastic, and we won't ratify it. And we still want to ship our plastic waste, which is now considered hazardous and dangerous to other countries. And I know for a fact that we have been sending it to Malaysia. And so this is the gray area, right? What is hazardous? What is deemed hazardous? And, there's still going to be illegal shipments. But from what we've heard from them, it's an ongoing issue. And now there's plastic being smuggled through paper waste, and they're building legal paper recycling. So from the activists, they're like, when are you going to get back here? Like, this is still a really big problem. Yeah.
Damn. And yeah, it's just kind of tough to fathom. And I think that, not any audience, especially Western audiences, but not like any audience, just seeing the impact of, what you put out into the world's got to go somewhere. So it's super important to see that and to see the actual ramifications of it. Arya, I want to go back to you. So you mentioned that COVID, changed the sort of conception of your project and the ending of it. I was just curious, now that you've lived with them and the audiences have started to see it, in this lens, how have they been responding to it? Has the pandemic, I guess, kind of changed how you think people would have responded to it prior? I'm just kind of curious what your reactions have been from people who have seen it and what they've said to you.
Yeah, that's for me. That it's been at, I don't know, 70 festivals by now already. I think that it is interesting to more people because it's about a pandemic, I guess. And but I can't really go back and imagine what people would think of the film would there not have been an actual pandemic. So yeah, I don't know. It's like the whole film instantly changed when this started going around the world. And I mean, that's not really a problem, but yeah, it's interesting. I have no I can't really. I did get responses, of course, that I wouldn't have had were there not a pandemic. For example, there was a review somewhere online. I saw it where somebody was making a point about the fact that my main character was the one not wearing a mask. So she was the asshole in the story. Like, right, yeah. This is something I could not foresee. Of course, that that's she is just
Sure.
she just doesn't know what's going on. So this is a completely different something completely different. I have to point this out. There's this reflection here that looks exactly like Marlena's room. I have Venetian blinds and the plants.
That's your
Yeah.
reflection? I was wondering that. I was like, is that my?
Yeah. That's not your reflection. That's the other side of my room. But people probably think that we are sitting in the same space, but we're actually 9 time zones apart.
That is the magic of Zoom and the magic of perception. The mask
I'm
is
sorry.
really funny. Oh
No,
that's
I was
really
wondering.
fine.
I was like, oh man, that's very.
You thought I
it's
had
kind of nuts.
a huge screen in front of me where
Yeah. A lot of
It's,
plans.
back to our topics.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I've been watching some like American television. I think this like network television, like them dealing with the pandemic, so strange because you have these actors. Like Law and Order SVU came back, and it's like, oh, they're still solving crimes and doing stuff. But sometimes characters wear masks. Sometimes the actors are just not. So it's just how do you narratively in COVID like deal with the fact that the pandemic is still going on, but you're still projecting this fantasy of relaxing and not thinking about conditions, which is crazy. And I think it creates this dissociative effect. So to have your films, be specifically about like the impacts that other people are making on each other, I think is so salient, and it's a thing that we really need. And with that, I know you'd said prior to this you'd watched each other's films, so I was curious if you had any questions or comments for each other that you'd like to ask.
Well, what I found very interesting about this about her film is, and that is something that is often overlooked by people that are, and that's why I think it's interesting for this festival also, because if you're just preaching to the choir, so to say, that we have to do something about the environment at an environmental film festival, that's a bit obvious. But the fact that actually the recycle industry is being exported and causing a lot of even worse pollution than the plastic already is in another country with less strict rules about this. I thought that was very, very interesting to see, and that's also not only happening in Malaysia, but a lot of places in Africa and Asia as well.
Yeah. And even within countries, I mean, the burden of waste, I think, is often placed on Black communities, people of color, poor communities. And, we look at recycling as sort of this public good, right? It's a benefit. We're doing a good thing. But even with any good, there's still these negative externalities. And I think hopefully we're able to think about how to move forward and sort of correct these inequities that have been going on for so many years and who's being impacted. And who, not everyone even has the opportunity to recycle or manage their waste in a way that, removes it from their environment. They're often living in waste, which I think, there's a lot of great films on that as well.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's not a very good thing to give people the feeling that they are doing a good thing by putting their plastic in a plastic bin. If then you think, well, I'm not one of the polluters. Yeah. But in fact, you are doing nothing, because a lot of time, well, in the Netherlands, for example, we have separate waste, glass and plastic and green waste and rest waste. And a lot of times when the processing factories they're always in trouble, and then they just throw everything in one, and then they burn it anyway. you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, then we all feel like we are doing something, but nothing is really happening, and I think that's harmful. So yeah, that should be more top-down global thing.
Yeah,
And,
more upstream policies. Yeah.
yeah, I think I sometimes feel like there are so many companies that are abusing this sense of in people that they are helping the environment, and actually they are that's just their way of selling more products that pollutes the world. So yeah, we can't. Of course, it's they say in the Netherlands there was this slogan that a better environment starts at home or something, or with yourself. And that's all nice, but we are just a large group of sheep, and we just there should be rules, you know, and regulations. It's yeah. So let's do that. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And with your film, it reminded me, I'm not sure if you've read this book, Last Chance to See by Douglas Adams, but he basically travels around with, I think, a zoologist, and sort of visits, you know, the people who are trying to save Komodo dragons and other species who are, you know, going extinct very soon. And so it wasn't just about these creatures, but also the people who are so close to the issue on a personal level. And that's what I love so much about your short was, you know, it is covering this big topic, which sometimes, again, seems so overwhelming. Like, you know, we're in the age of the Anthropocene, mass extinctions are going to happen. You know, extinctions do happen every year, I think, but
daily.
There's, and there's
that's not fiction. That's that's what's happening daily. Yeah,
this is happening. And I think, you know, thinking, I mean, especially during the pandemic, you know, people are around and thinking about these sort of things more. It's like, well, what can I do? And I think just understanding this one person who works at a museum and who's like closer to what's going on, you know, even a butterfly, like you kind of understand that personal level connection as well. Like there's people that are so close to the issue that are being impacted in a different way as well. Yeah.
The also, as just same as your film, this is not just this film is not for the CEO of Shell is not going to be influenced by my film. It's more meant as consolation for people like us that do worry about things that in the end we will lose, and it's okay. You know, we have to do everything now to make it as good as we possibly can for humans, and especially for the rest of life on the planet. But we there is some, you could say it's nihilistic, but it's sort of a positive nihilism to think that okay, you know, one day it doesn't matter anyway anymore.
Right. Then what's the point?
I mean,
it's more for it's meant as a comfort for people that worry too much, that's it.
Well, it's the serenity prayer, right? It's like, you know, you understand the things that you cannot change, and there's kind of I think that's another thing thinking about with your shorts is that there are direct things people can do to put information into light, like that the EPA in Kuala Lumpur can be like, look at all of this that's happening, and if you have everything based on individualized choice of you're a virtuous person if you wear a mask, you're a virtuous person if you put things away in the right way. Like that just kind of is one small thing versus, you know, these are these large scale things and large systemic things that are contributing to, you know, our global ecosystem. But acknowledging, hey, there is an endpoint to this, but do you want it to be a good endpoint, or do you want it to be like suffering? I mean, I think that there's personal agency, and I think both your films like really kind of unlock that. So it's really cool that we got to talk about both in conversation with each other. So now that we talked about these, I just want to ask, what are you all doing next? Like I know COVID's obviously, you know, held up a lot of things, but just kind of what's on your minds right now for future projects. And I'll start with you, Marlena.
Yeah. Well, continuing, showing this film at festivals, and also what we're doing is sort of having these private showings with organizations who are trying to communicate to policymakers. So that's been really cool. I think from the policy end, it's quite boring always to read papers and to get your point across. So short films and even feature films, there's other great plastic documentaries are a way to sort of also communicate to people who are making these, decisions and implementing new policies. And then we're also, my partner Troy and I, who's the cinematographer on the film, we're working on the other film that we have traveled to Malaysia to shoot on the Bajau Laut, which is a community, and it's an ethnic group of people in Southeast Asia, but we specifically lived for a month within a community in Bangau Bangau. And so another plastic film, but basically just following, their daily lives and how plastic is sort of this other element in the community now, and not just as waste, but just involved in their culture and rituals and how it's impacted their daily lives. So hopefully we'll have more time editing that and we'll get that out.
Yeah, certainly, definitely a companion piece. And Aryan, how about you? What's do you have anything in the pipeline next? You still have Sad Beauty going on in your head? What's next?
Well, no, that's just for these occasions. I go back in Sad Beauty mode, but besides that, I'm in pre-production for a new animation film. That's I always take something that interests me personally from my life or from current events, and I always place it in some kind of retro world, so you can so it gets a little bit detached from today, so you can have a broader view on it, and now I'm going to do that quite extremely, to place Facebook in the 1920s. So there's this dystopian world where the streets are full of projection screens and cameras, and people are always watched and filmed and shown. And the film is about the effect that has on one individual that lives in the street, that is trying to find some privacy in her dreams. And it will not end well.
That sounds super rad. I can't wait to you finish it.
Well, you're gonna have to wait, because it's going to be a 20-minute animation, so it's going to take until the end of next year probably to make it.
Wow.
Hey, if Sad Beauty tells us anything, we got time. So I'll chill and wait. So really want to thank you both so much for joining us today for this conversation, and want to thank you, the audience, for watching. We have plenty of other shorts blocks and other Q&As, conversations with other filmmakers. So please explore the program. Have a great time, and take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.